Imagine the most sacred halls of power in Christendom, where prayers were meant to ascend to heaven, now echoing with the sounds of a different kind of worship. How did the throne of St. Peter, a seat built on spiritual devotion, become the epicenter of such brazen corruption that it would sear itself into history as the ultimate symbol of moral decay? The year is 1501, and within the private chambers of the Vatican, a scene is unfolding so depraved it defies belief, all presided over by the man who held the keys to the kingdom of heaven, Pope Alexander VI. But his story is not one of a sudden fall from grace. It is the tale of a calculated, relentless climb where ambition systematically strangled devotion, a climb that began not in Rome, but on the dusty Iberian roads of his youth. The man who would become the most scandalous pope in history was born Rodrigo de Borja in 1431 inches, the Spanish town of Sativa. His destiny, however, was not shaped by divine calling but by the ancient, cynical art of nepotism. The pivotal rerouting of his life came when his uncle, Alfonso de Borja, ascended to the highest office as Pope Calixtus III. With a relative on the papal throne, young Rodrigo's path was sealed. He was not ordained through spiritual excellence or a profound connection to God. He was promoted through family connection. At the tender age of 25, he was made a cardinal deacon and sent to Rome, a city that would transform from a spiritual destination into both his personal playground and his political stage. The Rome that Cardinal Rodrigo de Borja entered was a city of breathtaking, almost theatrical contradictions. By day, it was the beating heart of the Catholic world, with pilgrims kneeling in reverence before golden altars, their chants filling the air like sacred smoke. By night, those same cobblestone streets witnessed transactions of flesh, power, and influence that would make the most jaded merchant blush. The papal court itself had become a bustling marketplace, and everything had a price, from a bishop's mitre to, it was whispered, divine forgiveness itself. Rodrigo understood this dual reality better than any theologian. He was not a man fighting the system's corruption, but one who studied and mastered it with the precision of a spider spinning its web. He accumulated wealth and ecclesiastical benefices across Europe, building a fortune that would rival any prince of the era. His lifestyle was a far cry from the humility and piety expected of a prince of the church. He resided in magnificent palaces that echoed with laughter and music, hosted lavish banquets that lasted deep into the night, and maintained a series of mistresses with a discretion that was, at best, thin. The most significant of these was Vanozza dei Catanei, a Roman noblewoman of considerable beauty and sharp political savvy. Between 1474 and 1482, she bore him 4 children: Juan, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Goffredo. To Rodrigo, each child was not merely an offspring but a vital chess piece in his grand, unfolding game of power. Their lives, their loves, and their futures would be strategically sacrificed on the altar of their father's overwhelming ambition. Even as a cardinal, Rodrigo's behavior was a public scandal that reached the highest levels. Pope Pius II was forced to send him a scathing letter in 1460, condemning his conduct during a visit to Siena, where his drunken and lewd behavior had, in the Pope's own words, shocked the whole town and court. But shame was a currency Rodrigo refused to spend. He had a papacy to win, and moral reservations were merely obstacles to be crushed underfoot. The conclave of August 1492 was his masterstroke. Behind the locked doors of the Sistine Chapel, beneath the very space where Michelangelo's masterpiece would one day dawn, a carefully choreographed dance of corruption unfolded. 23 cardinals gathered, and gold changed hands with the fluidity of holy water. Promises of power, wealth, and prestigious positions were whispered like prayers in the shadowy silence. When the white smoke cleared on the 11th of August 1492, Rodrigo Borja emerged victorious as Pope Alexander VI. His win was so blatantly bought that contemporaries and diplomats openly called it what it was: simony, the mortal sin of buying and selling holy office. Surprisingly, the people of Rome initially celebrated their new flamboyant pontiff. They had grown accustomed to his lavish displays and anticipated a papacy of magnificence and energy, a stark contrast to his frail predecessor. Bonfires illuminated the 7 hills, and triumphal arches rose as if in prayer. His coronation at St. Peter's Basilica was met with what observers called the greatest ovation any pontiff had ever received. For a brief, shining moment, Alexander VI seemed to promise a new era. He restored order to Rome's violent streets, established new magistrates to keep peace, and personally heard grievances every Tuesday, dispensing justice with what many praised as admirable efficiency. It appeared, against all odds, that divine providence might have placed the right man on the throne of Street Peter after all. But power does not build character, it mercilessly reveals it. The initial, hopeful reforms were quickly overshadowed by Alexander's relentless and naked pursuit of advancement for his children, his true passion project. His son Juan was made Duke of Gandia and married to a cousin of the King of Spain. His other son, Cesare, only 18 years old, was given the prestigious archbishopric of Valencia and later made a cardinal positions he treated not as sacred callings, but as mere stepping stones to secular power. The papal apartments, meant to be a sanctuary of faith and reflection, transformed into a theatre where the sacred and profane performed an obscene ballet. Dinners stretched into the night, accompanied by entertainments that pushed all boundaries of decency. The Pope's new, stunningly beautiful mistress, Julia Farnese, known as Julia la Bella, moved through the Vatican corridors as freely as any cardinal, a living, breathing reminder that the Pope's spiritual vows had been utterly trampled by earthly desires. The stage was now set, and the principal actors were in place. The world was about to witness just how far a pope would go when he believed his power was absolute and his impunity guaranteed. If the rise of the Borgias was a story of ambition, their reign became a masterclass in ruthless consolidation. The initial glow of Alexander's papacy had faded, replaced by the cold, hard reality of a family treating the church as its personal dynasty. The sacred was no longer merely mingling with the profane, it was being systematically conquered by it. This transformation was catalyzed not by a political defeat, but by a personal tragedy so profound it exposed the rotten core beneath the golden facade. The event that changed everything was a body, fished out of the Tiber River on a warm June night, a discovery that would momentarily crack the Pope's steely resolve and threaten to undo his entire corrupt empire. On the 14th of June 1497, the lifeless body of Juan Borgia, the Duke of Gandia, and Alexander's beloved eldest son, was discovered floating in the murky waters. His throat was slit, and his body bore the savage signature of 9 additional stab wounds, a testament to a fury that was both personal and political. The murder sent seismic shockwaves through Rome, but the most profound impact was on the Pope himself. The man who had schemed and bribed his way to absolute power was utterly broken by a grief so visceral it seemed divine. For 3 days and nights, Alexander VI locked himself away in his chambers, refusing food and sleep, his anguished sobs echoing through the Vatican's marble halls. He was no longer the vicar of Christ, but a heartbroken father crying out in the darkness. In this raw, unprecedented state of despair, he did something extraordinary. He publicly confessed his worldliness and announced a sweeping program of church reform. He vowed to restrain the luxury of the papal court, reorganize the corrupt chancery, and suppress the very simony and nepotism that had defined his own life and ascent. A commission of cardinals was hastily assembled, drafting ordinances that eerily anticipated the reforms of the future Council of Trent. For a fleeting, remarkable moment, it seemed a spark of redemption might emerge from the darkness, that the death of a son might save the soul of a father and the church he led. But grief, like everything else in Alexander's world, was a temporary indulgence. Within months, the reform proposals were forgotten, filed away in dusty archives like embarrassing relics of a momentary weakness. The Pope's sorrow curdled into a new, more focused, and more terrifying determination. His attention shifted from his murdered heart, Juan, to his surviving son, Cesare. If Juan had been the favorite, Cesare was the instrument. He was his father's sword, sharp, cold, and terrifyingly efficient. Cesare Borgia possessed a magnetic, dangerous allure. Tall, handsome, and preternaturally intelligent, he had been forced into the cardinalate by his father, but his talents were for warfare and statecraft, not theology. In a move that stunned Christendom, he became the first cardinal in history to voluntarily resign the sacred office in 1498. He shed his red robes like a snake shedding its skin, setting his sights on secular conquest and a destiny written in blood and steel, not scripture. The political chaos of Italy became Cesare's chessboard, and his father provided all the pieces. The French king, Louis XII, needed papal approval to annul his marriage, and Alexander saw a perfect opportunity for a cynical exchange. In a blatant deal, the Pope granted the annulment in exchange for French military support for Cesare's campaigns. Thus began a brutal conquest of the Romagna region, a campaign funded directly by the papal treasury and blessed by papal authority. Cesare's methods were so brutally effective, combining swift siege warfare, strategic assassination of rivals, and political betrayal, that a young Florentine diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli, who observed him firsthand, would later immortalize him as the ideal model for a new prince. Ruthless, pragmatic, and gloriously effective. This relentless war machine, however, required a constant and colossal flow of cash. The spiritual treasury of the church was now harnessed to fuel a secular war. The sale of spiritual favors became a systematic industrial-scale operation under Alexander. Indulgences, which promised reduction from time in purgatory, were sold like tickets to a celestial show, their proceeds funneled directly into Cesare's war chest. Church offices, from minor bishoprics to the ultimate prize of a cardinal's hat, were auctioned to the highest bidders with shameless transparency. Alexander appointed 47 new cardinals during his reign, each appointment representing a massive financial injection into the Borgia war effort. The College of Cardinals was no longer a spiritual senate advising the Pope on matters of faith. It was a board of directors who had bought their shares, their loyalties secured by greed and the power they had purchased. The Vatican had become the engine of a family dynasty, its sacred rituals perverted into fundraising mechanisms for conquest, its spiritual authority the primary currency for temporal power. The stage was now set not for a revival of faith, but for a descent into a depravity so profound it would forever burn the Borgia name into history as a byword for sacrilege. The zenith of Borgia power was not a coronation or a military victory, but an entertainment. It was the 31st of October 1501, All Hallows' Eve, a night when the veil between the sacred and the profane was believed to be at its thinnest. In the lavishly decorated apartments of Cesare Borgia, frescoed with the solemn faces of saints and classical heroes, a very different drama was about to unfold, one that would burn the Borgia name into history as the ultimate symbol of sacrilege. The guest list was a roll call of the corrupt, cardinals who had purchased their red hats, Roman nobles whose silence had been bought, and diplomats drawn by morbid curiosity. But the true performers were the 50 courtesans, sophisticated women of the Roman underworld, assembled for the amusement of the most powerful men in Christendom. And watching it all with a dispassionate eye and a steady hand was Johann Burchard, the papal master of ceremonies, whose dry, factual diary would preserve the scandal for posterity, ensuring the Borgias would never escape the judgment of history. The evening began deceptively, with a lavish dinner served in Cesare's chambers. Fine wines from the papal cellars flowed as freely as the conversation, which touched on politics, art, and war, a masterful display of cultivated refinement. But as the servants cleared the final plates, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The evening's true purpose began to reveal itself as the 50 courtesans began to dance. At first, they were clothed in silks and velvets, but as the music grew more insistent and the wine continued to pour, garments were shed. Burchard records with chilling precision the gradual transformation from conventional entertainment to an explicit spectacle, until the women danced completely naked under the flickering candlelight, their shadows dancing like demons on the Vatican walls. Then came the moment that gave the banquet its infamous name. Servants entered and took the candelabras from the tables, placing them on the marble floor to create islands of light in the shadowy room. Chestnuts were then scattered across the floor between these pools of illumination. The nude courtesans were ordered to get down on their hands and knees and crawl, their bodies weaving through the light and shadow, to collect the scattered nuts. The scene was a grotesque parody of a peasant harvest, played out on the Vatican's sacred floors for the leering amusement of the clergy. And presiding over this calculated degradation from a seat of honor was Pope Alexander VI himself, flanked by his children, Cesare and Lucrezia. The presence of the Pope's daughter at such an event remains one of history's most puzzling and damning details, a stark illustration of how completely the family's moral compass had been shattered. The final act of the evening plunged into even deeper depravity. Burchard's account describes how organized competitions were then held among the male guests, with servants moving through the room not with wine, but with tally sheets to keep score of each participant's performance with the courtesans. Prizes were offered: fine tunics of silk, elegant shoes, and costly barrettes, luxuries that turned intimate acts into a public sport with tangible rewards. In the heart of the Vatican, the seat of St. Peter, salvation was not being preached. It was being bartered for base entertainment, with the Pope himself as a witness and judge. This was the logical endpoint of a papacy where power had utterly corrupted the spirit, where the sacred had been not just abandoned, but actively defiled. The morning after, Rome awoke to a city unchanged in its outward rhythm. Pilgrims still flocked to St. Peter's, and cardinals attended their meetings, but beneath the surface, a seismic shockwave was spreading. Knowledge of the banquet of chestnuts leaked out through the Vatican's vast network of servants and minor officials. Diplomatic dispatches from Rome to courts across Europe soon carried the scandalous news, their writers struggling to convey their shock. Even in an era of considerable moral flexibility, The deliberate, theatrical depravity of the event stunned contemporaries. Reformers like Girolamo Savonarola now had irrefutable ammunition for their claims that the papacy was the Antichrist. Alexander VI's response was not remorse, but defiance. He doubled down on his support for Caesare's wars and continued his lavish lifestyle, as if the public exposure had liberated him from any last pretense of piety. Yet, the end was nearer than he knew. Just 2 years later, in August 1503, Alexander died suddenly, likely from malaria, though rumors of poisoning a tool his family had so often used swirled immediately. With his death, the Borgia Empire crumbled. Cesare, stripped of papal protection, saw his conquests evaporate and died in a minor skirmish in Spain just a few years later. Lucrezia survived, remaking herself as the Duchess of Ferrara, but she could never fully escape the scandal of her family name. The new pope, Julius II, refused to even occupy the Borgia apartments, moving to different rooms that would later be decorated by Raphael. It was a physical and symbolic rejection of his predecessor's legacy. The Banquet of Chestnuts was more than just a singular night of debauchery. It was the culmination of a papacy where power had utterly corrupted the spirit. It provided a powerful moral justification for the Protestant Reformation that would soon erupt and force the Catholic Church itself into a period of soul-searching that led to the Counter-Reformation. The chestnuts gathered from the floor that night were long discarded, but the questions they raised about the collision of absolute power and sacred duty continue to echo through the centuries, a timeless warning from the shadows of the Vatican. Thank you for following this dark chapter of history with us. If you were captivated by this story of power and corruption, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more journeys into the hidden truths of the past. Let us know in the comments what other historical scandals you'd like us to explore next.